Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. We start with the way that the jet stream pattern is going to evolve throughout this week, and it's going to continue to favor very high momentum west-to-east flowing air here around a broader trough that's been in the Gulf of Alaska. And that's going to be a kind of a mainstay of what we're expecting to be a major part of our long-range forecast. I'll come back to that in just a few moments. The flow then comes into the northwest through Northern California, and it kind of dives into a trough here. And as we've discussed so many times, this tends to produce a lot of upper-level convergence in this area, therefore higher atmospheric pressure and drier conditions overall, all within this whole area and through here. We'll see that in a few moments. The jet stream then kind of extends here into the North Atlantic and runs over into Europe. I'm going to finish this video talking a little bit about Europe. Now the question is, what is ultimately controlling this flow, and when should we expect change in this flow, and what lessons do we learn in October? I want to get to all of that right here at the beginning, because over the next 5 days, that particular pattern is going to set up for pretty substantial cold air event that's going to move through much of the eastern half of the United States. And of course, we picked up on this about a week and a half ago, but now we're kind of fully seeing this come into fruition. But do you notice right in through here, I want you to keep an eye on what's happening right here in this part of the North Pacific and the Gulf of Alaska, because that's going to be critical to the longer range forecast. Now, when we think back about what October gave us, for many here in the east, southeast, northeast, the whole of the East Coast, this is going to be the most significant prolonged cool event we've had in a while. Because throughout much of October, when you look at the temperature ranks, which is what you've got here, we've had a top 5 or a top 10 warmest Octobers on record, even despite the cool down we saw at the end of the month. So these are your October average temperature ranks by climate district, okay? Just to show you how cold that air is going to be, this is where we do expect from the National Digital Forecast Database the extent of frost conditions to be over the next 7 days. And so you can see we're getting down in here into the Mid-South, and this is clipping through parts of northern Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and into the Appalachian Mountains, and possibly getting out under the Piedmont here. So we do have more widespread frost risk. But as I said, that upper level convergence is going to drive overall a drier pattern for about the next 10 days or so. But I want to watch carefully for some shifts around the 12th. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think that the pattern we're going to be in for the next possibly 45 to 60 days or so is going to be about a 10 to 12 days on and then a 10 to 12 days off. Expect pattern shifts that frequent, okay? Over the next 10 to 12 days, you can see the extent of the much drier air wrapped into that convergent part of the flow. And it's only along the southern edge where the front pushes down and then where the trough ejects here that we have the best chance at heavy precipitation. But it's that Gulf of Alaska trough that continues to drive the moisture into the Pacific Northwest and Northern California, keeping that area wet. Okay, comparing what we've got coming up to where we've just been, this is what the month of October looked like. In fact, let me blow that up for you. The month of October looked like in terms of precipitation ranks. All right. So now, just if you go back and look, that's where we're going, and this is where we just came from. The only place that's staying consistent is going to be the West Coast with more precip. This whole area going to go over toward a drier pattern here. And that's going to be important, especially for a lot of folks that have had just a full hard stop put on harvest in the Corn Belt. I should have extended that much larger in my drawing here, but it just shows all the places that have been so wet this past month or so. Okay, thinking about all of that, I want to get to this graphic. So much of this pattern as of late has been connected with the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, which is an oscillation that begins in Africa with a phase of 1, and then it moves 3, 4, moves through 8 phases, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's roughly their positions, okay? And what we've seen is that over much of the last month, the month of October, where you see the cooler colors, that's where we have the best rising motion, and hence the position of the MJO. And it's been in this space, particularly centered around phase 5. Now, what I want you to notice is it's not been over here in the Pacific. It's not been right here in this part of the Indian Ocean. Those are two areas that we've not seen the MJO. In fact, we can look at it and where it's going to be going here in the near term by looking at this type of a graph as well. So it's current day over the next 15 days. And where we see these blue-green colors, you have more rising motion. So where do we see it extending to? It's kind of coming back over into those same places where it had been. We can also see later an extension of this going towards South America, and that's going to be critical for my South American video, which I'm going to produce next. But my point here is to show you that overall, if you just look at these graphs, which might be a little easier to understand, we continue to get a lot of rising motion in this area, general subsidence across parts of the Pacific, and again, more rising motion here over parts of South America. Okay, the context. We've got a developing La Nina. We've been talking about that for a while. And what's going on is where you see these blue-green colors, that is from today through the next 15 days, we continue to see stronger trade winds in this direction. Now, the red colors represent where either those trade winds are weaker or they're even westerly. So we can often think of them as coming from this direction. And generally speaking, where they meet, that's where you get that rising motion. And where does that sit on top of? Kind of that phase 5-6 area again. Now, my point in talking about all of this is to remind you that October, the MJO was mostly in phases 5 and 6, especially through the first 3 weeks of the month. Then instead of doing what we thought, which was to move over into phase 7 and 8, it jumped right through null space here and popped out briefly, mostly into phase 1, but a little bit into phase 2. And the forecast, which is seen in these kind of colored lines you see here, is to come right back over somewhere into 5 and 6 again. What I'm saying is it's avoiding phases 8 and 7. It's avoiding, for the most part, phases 3 and 4. It's just moving back and forth on this side, or these two sides of the diagram. Now, why is that important? Well, let me show you. If we look at the relationship between the MJO phase 5, when there is a La Nina event, it really favors trough development here, okay? We saw it there back in October. What about if it goes into phase 1, which is where, if you just notice, I'll go back to it, it popped out over here just at the end of October. That still reinforces troughs in this area, but it also sends the energy from those troughs, those short waves, into the middle part of the United States. And we saw that. There seems to be a very strong teleconnection with the MJO. The other piece of this, I believe, has to do with ocean temperatures. Now, because of the deep troughs of low pressure we have seen here in the North Pacific, the Gulf of Alaska, we have had a lot of cloud cover, we've had a lot of upwelling, we've had a lot of just cooling off of the water in place here, all while our La Nina continues to strengthen, and there's even a cool extension of water coming off of the Baja of California to Hawaii. We call this the negative phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation and the negative phase of ENSO, or El Nino. So we've got La Nina going on there, and we have got this cool water that's tucked in here. Now, thinking about all of that, if we just said, all right, let La Nina dominate what's going to happen in November, it continues to give us above normal precipitation in this area. We'll get rain shadow effect in this part of Montana and, on the leeward side of the mountains. It also tends to favor near normal precipitation in here and through across parts of the plains. Where it tends to be drier is kind of where I'm putting this hatching, all across the southern tier of the U.S. So this is the correlation with November Nino 3.4 region ocean temperatures, and that is this area and through here, where we've been showing the water's cold. The temperatures in there are averaging minus 1 degree Celsius, and they've continued to cool, and we've got cold water underneath that. So this would be that part of the connection. So given what I've showed you so far, notice this. The new update from November the 10th, so about 10 days from now, because we've already seen what the next 10 days are going to hold, right? So we've already seen this with precipitation, and we've also, there we go, we've seen this in terms of temperatures. What are we going to get beyond that? Well, this is what the model is suggesting. Above normal precipitation all through here. Possibly above normal in the Canadian Prairie, in the Northern Plains, an active storm track kind of Ohio River Valley north. We're drier in Texas, drier over in the southeast to the mid-Atlantic. And you can see how that's very La Nina-like. But where is the really cold air? Well, if I take you back here and show you what the forecast is through December 10th, you notice we continue to favor cooler weather not only here in this part of the United States, but along the whole of the, kind of on the windward side of the Rocky Mountains. And while it's showing mild conditions for a broad sector here of North America, it's a transitional season, and occasionally the troughs come out, and we get shots of colder air that will come through. But we have yet to build up a deep storehouse of cold air anywhere in Canada, and the sea ice content right in through this area is not yet extensive either. So all of the coldness is here it's in the Gulf of Alaska where that cold water is. And I believe that's going to continue to reinforce the pattern we've been seeing. Now, we're going to get shots of cooler air that are going to come through here, and some of them may last 6, 8, 10 days. That's what I told you. Every 8 to 10 days, I think the pattern's going to overturn itself. And I want to keep providing more evidence for that. Because if we look at the long-range European model forecast, it just pops back out over here and then stays generally in this vicinity. There might be some movement over into phase 7, but what we don't see is it doesn't pop out into phase 3, 4, and it doesn't pop out way over here in high amplitude phase 7, 8. It's avoiding these phases, 7, 8, and 3, 4. Now, I want to show you why that's important. Because historically, if we get over into phase 3, and there is the negative INSO or La Nina, we ridge out here and send that trough to the Aleutian Islands. That gives us kind of a reflection of a trough and much colder conditions here in this area. So see, we're not getting that. We keep putting the troughs in the Gulf of Alaska. And if I give you another perspective, if it bumps out to phase 8, then we tend to build another big ridge over the western United States. And again, instead of the trough being over the Aleutian Islands, it's just a bit further to the south. We just are not seeing that being the case. But what I want to share with you is, should this forecast get the MJO coming on around over here to phase 7, 8, you'll get that transition. Or by some, really poor forecast, it pops out into phase 3, 4 first, you'll get that forecast I just showed you. But we don't see that occurring at this point. So long story short, this La Nina and the cold water you see here, plus the forecast of the MJO wanting just to go back and forth between these areas, means that the pattern is going to be reinforcing the troughs of low pressure that are in the Gulf of Alaska. And that would be why we continue to see the colder air here, more often than not, and the above average precipitation in that same area, with systems ejecting into the plains every few days. That's what I've got. That's what I'm currently seeing in the long range. Now remember, on the evening of the 5th, we get all new monthly forecast data, and I can't wait to share that with you. That'll be coming up, but this is what I'm currently watching in the longer term right now. All right? Okay, let's shift gears now and let's talk about the near term, because we're watching the first of those large high pressure cells come in where we have that convergence. Remember me telling you about that at the beginning. So as we play from this afternoon through this evening, we had the scattered showers in and around Missouri into Illinois, getting over to Indiana. This is through this evening, getting into tomorrow morning, tomorrow midday, tomorrow afternoon and evening. It's all around the periphery of this high pressure cell that we have that frontal boundary lifting the air right in through there, okay? Because the trough of low pressure is dipping down, coming through like this. So this is 11 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday. Let's play out to Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, getting into Wednesday evening. So you see, it's going to be this area that sees the most precipitation overall from this pattern, that and what's coming into the Pacific Northwest. Now to show you the broader picture of this, let's do our typical multi-model analysis here, which looks at the GFS on the left versus the ECMWF on the right. And you're again going to see, I think, pretty solid model agreement here between the two models as we play this forward. So let's get through what we've already seen. So this is through Tuesday, getting into Wednesday, and we're going to stop this here 7 a.m. on Thursday morning. I still like this. Both models showing another system coming into the Pacific Northwest on Thursday. The frontal boundary here producing the precipitation from Texas through parts of the southeast, possibly some snow in parts of the Appalachian Mountains at high elevation. And as we play this on forward through Thursday, getting into Friday, you see the action is still focused on the West Coast. That's where the troughs come in. High pressure in the middle part of the country through the end of the week and getting into the weekend. So could we get some scattered light precip in the midsection of the U.S.? Absolutely, but no major development happening because we're right now in that 10-day time period in the midsection of the country where we are the off again side of things. So in other words, high pressure, no major precip. When does it return? Well, let's get through Sunday and now into Monday and Tuesday of that next week. So we continue to see the systems colliding with the West Coast. That's consistent in both models here. But as I said, we would expect change to start to pick up around the 10th, 11th, or 12th. And look at what the models are doing. The European around the 10th digs a deep low here. That's the first wave that ejects. It's kind of there in the GFS. Where do they start to come together? Well, you just notice you get out there to the 11th and we start to get stuff brewing again in the midsection of the country. That would then begin that time period of more active weather going out that far. So you see, that's my kind of 8 to 10 days off, 8 to 10 days on. So let's add it up and let's first look at the European model. total accumulated precipitation over the next 7 days. So this gets us out to next Monday morning. And I think you won't be surprised with what you just saw in the forecast. GFS, ready? Same thing. Very consistent. There's just model resolution differences here that really are showing up. Look at this. I love this. This is the difference between the ECMWF and the GFS. This would be where the ECMWF is wetter, GFS is wetter. Now, it seems to be that the European digs a little deeper with the trough into Northern California than the GFS, which tends to bring more of its wetter weather here. And the GFS has a little bit more wetter conditions a little bit farther to the north than the European, which digs it south. But this is still pretty good model agreement. And the models also agree as to the pattern going from, the end of this next 7-day time period into day 14. Watch. You see from next Monday into Tuesday, getting out to Wednesday, Thursday. Look, by day 10, the models have already sent a trough into the midsection of the country. So look, the pattern's beginning its shift by the 11th of the month. So ridging is trying to come in here. Not much, but some ridging. But the trough is there. We'll get systems that will eject on the eastern side of the trough, and it will move through. But you're going to notice as I take you out there all the way out through week 2, no large ridges are developing here. Remember, to get a large ridge to develop here, you got to get help. The help's got to come from the ocean temperature pattern and the MJO, and it doesn't want to break down into persistent large ridging. So the flow comes screaming around like this and then dives into the United States. And that's what I think we're going to see. So watch what ends up occurring here. This is the next 7 days of precipitation anomalies. And as I slide this forward, we're just moving forward with a 7-day sliding window. So as we get out here, now the end of that 7-day time period is on the 11th, okay? As we play forward, notice how we begin to transition in the midsection of the country to normal precipitation around the 12th and 13th. And then we start to see a wetter bias showing up here, fully into week 2 in this region. That's what we'd expect as that trough comes through. This is really consistent here in the latest forecast graphics. And just to add to it, the GFS ensemble says the same thing. You now start to see in the week 2 better chances of above normal precipitation there. All right, I really like the consistency we're seeing in these models. Okay, let's talk temperatures now. This was the latest update. I was recording about 5 o'clock on Monday afternoon. This is what we got in terms of the all hazards weather map. So we do have a winter weather advisory that's in place in Colorado, but this is a freeze warning in through here and a freeze watch right here in parts of the Mid-Atlantic up into Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So we're keeping an eye on how these things are all kind of shaping up with that colder air. So why don't we first, let's go ahead and take a look at the minimum temperatures. So we've already seen these minimum temperatures early this morning on Monday. There's Tuesday's minimum temperatures, getting into Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. And what do you see? Much of the Midwest, all the way down to the Mid-South and South, we've got cold temperatures compared to average, 5 to 9 degrees cooler than average. We then get into the weekend and things start to moderate. It's still cold. I mean, we've got temperatures in the low 30s, but moderation is happening that day 5 through 10 time period in the Midwest. Let me show you in high temperatures, okay? Monday's highs already experienced these. There's Tuesday, getting into Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Now watch the warm-up coming here in the Northern Plains. That's Friday, getting into Saturday, and Sunday. So you start to see this rebound here. We've already picked up on that because I showed you at the beginning that day, next 5 days was bringing in the cooler weather in here. Well, the ridge, watch the pattern starts to go back into something like this once we get day 5 through 10. So this warm-up occurs while this next trough begins to slash across the country. So day 10 through 15, we see that beginning to take shape. And that's what we're going to be keeping a very close eye on moving forward. So that's your next 15 days in terms of temperatures. I'm getting a lot of questions about Europe, so why don't we just take a quick step over there as we finish up this video. Last 30 days have been very dry throughout much of Europe, especially in the Black Sea area, just north of the Black Sea here. So this is Ukraine, and this is the southern Russian wheat belt, all right? When we look out over the next 10 days, we've now started to see better chances of rainfall showing up here. It's not that it's going to be overly wet, but better chances. And much of southern Europe off the Mediterranean is going to be wet as well. But that temperature pattern is one we're going to have to watch carefully because we do notice more cold air is going to be coming into parts of Western Europe, but a warm-up is going to be occurring here, Black Sea north. I want to watch that very carefully. One last thing I want to bring up. It's time we start talking about this. I know it doesn't feel like the right time, but let's go to the stratosphere. This is what our polar vortex looks like right now. So just remember, the stronger and more of a donut shape we get out of the polar vortex, the better the cold air is kind of left and kept over the North Pole. You do notice that we have, when you look way up here at 10 millibars, we kind of have two pieces to this flow. I just want to let you know that I'm keying in on and watching carefully exactly what's going to be going on with this polar vortex as it starts to shift around. And because we get into those colder months, we can get that connection between the troposphere and stratosphere really starting to show up to help develop big outbreaks of colder air. And I do think they're going to happen this winter. So I'll keep an eye on all of this and I'll report back to you again on Thursday. Have a good week. We'll talk to you then. Thanks.